he almost cancelled. Standing outside the small cafe, adjusting the collar of his only decent shirt, he told himself this was a bad idea. Blind dates were for people with spare time and confidence, two things a poor single dad rarely had. But his sister had insisted, had even set up the profile for him, saying he deserved one normal evening that wasn't about bills, school lunches, or exhaustion. So he pushed the door open. The cafe was warm, softly lit, smelling of coffee and baked bread. Couples murmured to each other, laughter rising and falling like gentle waves. He scanned the room, clutching his phone with the name his sister had given him. Then he saw her. She sat alone at a corner table, shoulders slightly hunched, hands wrapped tightly around a mug she hadn't touched. Her eyes were red, not from makeup, from crying. He stopped walking. This wasn't what he expected. The photo his sister had shown him was polished, confident, sharp eyes, controlled smile. The woman in front of him looked nothing like a powerful executive. She looked broken. He hesitated, then approached slowly. "Hi," he said softly. I think I'm your blind date." She looked up, startled, clearly having forgotten where she was. For a split second, panic crossed her face, as if she considered pretending not to be her. Then she sighed. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. I was going to cancel. You don't deserve to walk into this." "It's okay," he replied, gesturing to the chair. "If you want, I can just sit. No expectations." Something in his voice, calm, unguarded, made her nod. "I'm Elena," she said after a moment. "I'm Daniel." They sat in silence, not awkward silence, the kind that lets you breathe. Finally, she laughed quietly, shaking her head. "This is probably the worst first impression imaginable." He smiled faintly. "I've had worse days." She studied him, curious. "Really?" "My 5-year-old once flushed my phone down the toilet while I was on hold with the electricity company," he said. "Today's been calm." That earned a real laugh, small but real. They ordered coffee. She apologized again. He waved it off, and slowly, almost accidentally, conversation began. She didn't talk about work. She didn't talk about success. She asked about him instead, about his son, about how he managed alone. "Barely," he said honestly, "but somehow we do." She watched him, as if trying to understand something beyond his words. An hour passed, then another. The cafe began to empty. Outside, the sky darkened. And then, just as he began to think this might actually be the beginning of something gentle and unexpected, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her face changed. The color drained. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes filled again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think he'd—" "He?" Daniel asked carefully. She closed her eyes. "My assistant. He's probably panicking. I didn't tell anyone where I was going tonight." He frowned. Why would that be a problem? She inhaled deeply, then met his gaze. "Because I'm the CEO of a company with 12,000 employees, and tomorrow morning I have to fire someone I care about." The words hung between them. Daniel leaned back slightly, absorbing it. CEO. He glanced at her again, seeing her differently now, not as intimidating but as human under a crushing weight. "You don't look like someone who enjoys that," he said. "I don't," she replied, "but it's necessary, or so the board says." He nodded slowly. "I've been on the other side of that conversation." Her eyes softened. "I know." They sat quietly again. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Fear, maybe, or resolve. "Daniel," she said softly, "before this goes any further, I need to tell you something." His chest tightened. "Okay. This isn't just a blind date for me," she continued. "I asked my assistant to set this up after reading a personnel file." He blinked. What?" She swallowed. "Yours." The cafe felt suddenly smaller. "You're the janitor at our downtown office," she said gently. "Night shift, single father, excellent performance reviews. Always early, always polite." His heart began to pound. "You're my CEO." "Yes." Silence crashed down between them. He stood up immediately. "I should go." She reached for his wrist, not forcefully, just enough to stop him. "Please don't. This isn't appropriate," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You're my boss. And tomorrow," she said quietly. I might not be. He froze. What do you mean? She looked down at her hands. The board wants me to choose between cutting costs or stepping down, and the easiest cuts are people like you. The words hit him harder than he expected. She leaned closer and whispered, her voice breaking, Daniel, I saw your name on the list. The world tilted. He pulled his hand back slowly and sat down again. Not because he wanted to, but because his legs no longer trusted him. I'm sorry, she said, tears spilling over. I tried to fight it. I tried to find another way. I set up this date because I needed to see you as a person before making a decision I can't undo. He stared at the table, at the coffee ring she'd left earlier. You already knew me, he said softly, on paper. Yes, she whispered, and now I know your voice, your laugh, your kindness. He swallowed hard. Then why does it still feel like you're about to take everything from me? She didn't answer. Minutes passed. Then Daniel stood again, this time steadier. My son thinks I'm a hero, he said quietly. Not because I have money, but because I show up every day. If tomorrow you take my job, I'll still show up for him. She broke down completely. I don't want to be the reason he stops believing in you, she sobbed. He looked at her, heart aching, not with anger, but with something worse, understanding. Then don't, he said. The next morning, the board meeting shook the company. Elena walked in, calm, resolute. She didn't fire Daniel. She resigned. Weeks later, Daniel was offered a new position, facility operations manager, by the interim CEO, who had quietly admired his work ethic for years. And one evening, long after the dust settled, Daniel met Elena again at the same cafe. This time she wasn't crying. And this time, when she whispered something to him, it didn't break his heart. It healed it.